It's not often I talk about games on this channel that are so important to gaming as a whole, such as the original Doom from 1993. Sure, I've made videos on the original Half-Life, Half-Life 2, and Team Fortress 2, however those games simply would not exist without Doom. Within the first few months of being released, Doom quickly cemented itself as an important stepping stone in not only the FPS genre, but gaming as a whole. At this point, most of you probably know that Doom in the 90s was downloaded on more computers than Windows was. You probably know that this was a technical wonder of its time. This video about Doom 1 and 2 is not a video about technical prowess or how revolutionary it was at the time. I'm not going to waste your time with information you already know. What I will give you is my personal experience on beating Doom 1 and 2 30 years later. I also intend to show you the aspects that I liked and what parts I had gripes with, because despite this game being still pretty good for a 30-year-old game, there are some not good aspects that have not aged the best. However, before we actually get into the reviews themselves, I'm going to say this right now. I think Doom 1 and 2 are still great games to this day that easily stand the test of time. I consider the original Doom one of my favorite games of all time, in fact top 10. But why? Why does Doom still hold up? Why do people keep talking about Doom 30 years later, and why is Doom such a great game? Well, I think it's about time we answer that question. But before we begin, go down and hit that like and subscribe button. It helps me out a lot, more than you think. It's free, only takes 5 seconds to do. And share this video with everyone I can. My goal is to eventually hit 100k, so if you want to be part of that, you know what to do. With that all being said, grab yourself a snack, sit back, because we got some demons to slay, as we take a look at the original Doom Duology. Duology, more like Doomology. I'm sorry, that was really bad.
Say to you while watching the expert actor.
Now, like always, I like adding fun facts before we actually dive into the meat and potatoes of the video. The fun fact for this video is this video was originally the original Doom trilogy, which was going to be Doom 1 and 2, with the inclusion of Doom 64. However, I had some complications getting Doom 64 to work / record, so it's probably going to be its own video. But do not fret. We will eventually take a look at Doom 64. However, that seems like a bit of a headache, so I'd rather not do a ton more work than I already have to do for this video. I should also probably mention the fact that I'm playing on Hurt Me Plenty, which is the normal mode of Doom instead of Ultra Violence. So if I mention that something's too easy, just know it's because I'm on normal mode and not the hardest difficulty. Basically, just take everything I say about difficulty with a grain of salt. Now, from what I've seen online, the Doom community seems to be pretty chilled, all things considered. However, there's always been a bit of a stigma around the whole difficulty system in Doom, specifically about people who don't play on Ultra Violence, and I never understood why, but you do you, boo. Who the fuck put that in my script? Alright, let's actually get into the video, starting with Doom from 1993. Now, just like Half-Life and Half-Life 2, Doom was one of those games that I purposely avoided just in case I ever wanted to play it, and it did not disappoint. Picking my difficulty, being plopped in E1M1, and hearing Bobby Prince's classic At Doom's Gate empowered me to bring Doom. E1M1 is one of the most famous video game levels of all time. In fact, I would go as far as to say the entirety of Knee Deep in the Dead is one of the most infamous set of levels in gaming history. And it's not hard to see why. Knee Deep in the Dead is a great introduction to Doom. It teaches the player all the basics pretty quickly. Key cards, enemy types, weapons, secrets, and everything else you need to know. It shows you the ropes and what to expect going forward. The chapter itself is filled with some of my favorite levels in the game. Knee Deep in the Dead doesn't have any of the more complex and visually impressive levels, however despite that, you should still be able to get a feel for the game. Right off the bat, a lot of new players might realize that Doom is a very weird game. While yes, it is a first-person shooter, it's not really like any other first-person shooters out there. Unless you want to count Wolfenstein 3D, but then again it's the same engine, so fuck you. Doom is a very simple game, and that simplicity extends to the controls. The only controls in Doom are movement and aiming. There's no jumping, and there's no looking up or down. A lot of new players might be put off by that, but it's actually pretty easy to get used to, especially because Doom is a pretty fast-paced game, and you're forced to learn those controls unless you want to perish. Doom, as most people probably know, is very unforgiving. It's challenging, but it's not challenging in a way that makes you want to quit. It makes you want to get better. It's an addicting challenge. Overcoming the enemies means prioritizing certain targets, always being on top of ammo, being aware of your surroundings, and learning the map like the back of your hand. If you want to overcome the challenges, the enemies, and everything else in your way, you have to become the namesake of the game, Doom. You have to become these demons, Doom. Something Doom gets right is making you feel like a force to be reckoned with. It's no secret that players, when playing games, like to be in control. They like to be destructive, and they like to be powerful. A good example of this is Demo Man from TF2. Now, I don't need to tell you why Demo Man is such a great class in TF2. Fuck, I made an entire video about it. The reason why Demo Man is picked so often is because how powerful he is, and can single-handedly destroy entire teams. Demo Man is such a great class because he's so incredibly powerful. He gives players the chance to feel unstoppable. Just like how in Doom, you have to become unstoppable in order to fight back the forces of hell. Another game that can be compared to is the original Half-Life, and what I mean by that is both in Doom and Half-Life, you're a one-man army surviving the impossible, beating the odds. In Half-Life, it's Gordon Freeman's goal to escape Black Mesa. However, he has to face not only the forces of Zen, but also the military, all alone. Just like how in Doom, you're a Marine fighting your way through hell, all alone. It's not a coincidence that these games released after the original Doom took these ideas that Doom had popularized. Because Doom back then and even now is an incredibly fun and addicting game. Beating the ever-loving shit out of demons is just flat out fun, which is made ever so better by Bobby Prince's soundtrack, making you feel unstoppable. However, just because you feel unstoppable doesn't mean you are unstoppable. Doom is a very challenging and punishing game. Enemies are relentless, ammo is scarce, there's traps everywhere, and most doors are locked with color keycards. Now, just because Doom is a challenging game doesn't mean you can take your time with it. No, Doom is a very fast-paced game. Slowing down for even a second could spell your, well, doom. There's enemies constantly on screen and you have to prioritize certain enemies over others. There's always something happening. There's always something for you to do, and you're always supposed to be thinking. You're supposed to always be on your feet. You have to overcome everything that this game throws at you. It quickly becomes overwhelming. Combine that with some of the dickish level design in gaming history, Doom is a game that's not for everyone. And that's okay. Not every game is going to fit every gamer's preference. But despite that, Doom's difficulty is not cruel for the most part, but we'll talk about that when the time comes. In Doom, in order to overcome Doom's difficulty, you have to be thinking critically, not only about encounters, but being resourceful, which means you have to be on top of ammo consumption. You have to use your surroundings to your advantage, like ducking in and out of cover, and this doesn't always work, as more often than not, you'll find yourself up against a horde of demons. Now, you could go in guns blazing, and sure, most times you'll come out on top, but sometimes you have to thin out the horde. Now, you might be thinking, why thin out the horde? We can easily take every demon down all at once. Well, you possibly could do that, but there's a chance you may die, and Doom punishes you hard for dying. A feature in Doom that I really like is the fact upon dying and retrying a level, you are stripped of all your arsenal, which incentivizes you not to die. A lot of people actually don't like this idea, as it seems punishing, and when you lose your entire arsenal and you're left with just your fist and your pistol, everything becomes 10 times more difficult. However, I like this because you are punished for not being on top of everything. But even when you are, it doesn't matter, because at the beginning of each chapter, you are stripped of all your arsenal, and the game doesn't get any easier to adjust for your lack of weapons, which means you have to get through some of the tougher enemies with just a pistol and your fist. Enemies don't get any weaker, they get stronger. Speaking of enemies, why don't we discuss the enemies? The enemies in Doom are arguably the most important part about Doom. In every Doom game, starting with the original up until Doom Eternal, there's always been a vast variety of different and unique enemies. There's enemies that fly, enemies that make you fry, and enemies that make me cry. There are two distinct enemy types in Doom, the first one being hit scanners, and the second one being projectile throwers. Let's start with the first type of enemies you see, zombie soldiers. There's 3 distinct zombie soldiers. However, Doom 1 only includes there's two of them. The first zombie soldier you encounter are the basic SMG gunners. Now, as you can probably imagine, because they're the first enemy you encounter, they're not very strong, and they're very simple. If they see you, they shoot you. I should probably explain how hit scan works in not only Doom, but in all first-person shooters in general. If you're like me, you probably first heard the word hit scan from TF2, but it's actually in most FPS games. The way it works is an enemy or a gun has a certain line of sight. If an enemy or a player is detected in that line of sight, depending on how far close the target is, it will inflict damage instantly, unlike projectiles that actually need to travel in order to deal damage. Now, that's a very simple explanation on how it works. It's obviously more complex than that, but I'm too dumb to go into detail. The second zombie soldier being the shotgunner, which does significantly more damage. They are a major threat and will be top priority for you to kill, as they can shred your health in seconds. However, they tend to group up, so killing them is pretty easy if you use cover, but other than that, the zombie soldiers are the only two hit scanners in the game. There are significantly more enemies in the game that use projectiles as a major attack, so let's talk about those. The first projectile throw you encounter are imps. Imps are pretty simple. They act similar to zombie soldiers, but instead of having a hit scan weapon, they throw fireballs. Now, imps are pretty uninteresting. They're not exactly imposing in any way. The projectile they throw is pretty slow and easy to dodge. The next enemy you encounter are pinkies. Pinkies are a unique enemy type having only melee attacks, which would make you assume that it makes them not threatening. And for the most part, they aren't. However, there is one thing that makes them threatening, and that's there's so damn many of them. I have a fucking problem with pinkies. They're everywhere in this game. What? Can you fuck off with the pinkies? Are you fucking kidding me? Pinkies are by far the enemy you encounter the most, bar none, especially in episode 2. E2M6 Hall of the Dams. There's so many damn pinkies, it's not even funny, and they just keep coming. Don't make a joke about that. It gets to the point where it's more annoying than anything, because they like to group up in packs. It becomes incredibly easy to get cornered or overwhelmed. Once again, don't make a joke about that. Pinkies aren't hard to deal with. It takes 2 point-blank shots with a shotgun to kill. It's just that they swarm you like mosquitoes. I don't like them. They're annoying as shit, but they are pretty fun to punch in the face. They also have a variant called the Spectre, which is just a pinky but slightly translucent and very difficult to look at. Ugh, my eyes. The next enemy is probably the most famous enemy from Doom, the Cacodemon. Let's talk about Cacodemons. Cacodemons are complete pushovers. During your first encounter with them, you're in this tight hallway facing down one of these Cacodemons, and at first it's pretty terrifying. However, you soon realize these guys are complete jokes. Even in tight areas, Cacodemons are not intimidating at all. It takes 6 point-blank shotgun shots to take them down, and because of a feature in Doom called Pain Chance that gives an enemy a percentage chance to be stunned with pain, Cacodemons become laughably exploitable, especially with a chain gun and plasma rifle. Even with the base shotgun, Cacodemons rarely ever get the chance to shoot their projectile. Even with the other enemies in multiple Cacos, they're not very difficult. They move pretty slow, and they continuously hunt you down in a straight line. It's pretty easy to strafe around them. Now, I get my criticism of the Cacodemons could be simply chalked up to me playing on Hurt Me Plenty instead of Ultra Violence. However, I feel like the problems I have with the Cacos has nothing to do with difficulty but the base design of it, and it's due in part because of Pain Chance. Cacodemons have the highest percent of Pain Chance out of all the demons. Difficulty does not change that. Whether you're playing on Ultra Violence or Hurt Me Plenty, a chain gun or plasma rifle will still render them useless. The next enemy we have is easily one of the most controversial in the history of Doom, the Lost Souls. Online, the Lost Souls are constantly being debated whether or not they're annoying or just completely useless, and I kinda fall somewhere in the middle. I don't think they're annoying, but I don't think they're useless. Just like every other enemy in Doom, the Lost Souls have a certain purpose that they serve. The purpose they serve is to overwhelm, and that's why they often come in packs and feel like mosquitoes. But unlike the Pinkies, the Lost Souls are actually threatening because they not only move faster, but they lock onto you in an endless crusade unless shot at. It's not really until Doom 2 when the Lost Souls actually become annoying, and that's because of a specific enemy that we'll get to when we talk about Doom 2. But other than that, I don't think they're very annoying. In fact, in Doom 1, they probably have one of the lowest priorities because they're extremely easy to dodge if you're paying attention. And the last normal enemy we have are the Barons of Hell. Nothing too interesting about them besides the fact that they're the toughest base enemy in the game. They're just bigger, tankier versions versions of imps, and that's all the enemies we have. However, there are two bosses, the first one being the most famous creature from Doom, the Cyber Demon, and there's no doubt why. Just look at this fucking thing. While the Cyber Demon boss fight is pretty underwhelming, encountering it for the first time was fucking intimidating as hell. Pun very much intended. The first time you meet him in the shores of hell, it's just you and him in this big ass arena. While it's comically easy to beat him, I don't think that's why people remember the Cyber Demon. Besides the design, the first encounter you have with him is very intimidating. Not only because it's the biggest enemy you encounter, but until that point you never really encountered anything like him. And speaking of the design, the Cyber Demon has one of the best designs in the Doom franchise. This mixture of machine and demon makes this behemoth of a boss one you won't forget. Unlike the Spider Mastermind. Talk about underwhelming. It's probably one of the only real gripes I have with Doom. The Spider Mastermind is the final boss of Doom, and it's really just a bad boss fight, because it takes the whole point of the Cyber Demon, it makes it worse. The point of the Cyber Demon was to take the concept of shooting it until it dies and putting that in a boss fight. The Spider Mastermind does the same thing, except in a less interesting way. Not only can it be killed pretty easily with the BFG, but you can absolutely wail on this thing, because it's pretty easy to trick it into infighting with the Kako and Baron, which not only distracts it, but does a pretty hefty amount of damage to it. It's just kinda upsetting that the final boss of this amazing game is so poorly made, but honestly, it doesn't really bother me too much, as the rest of the game is so incredibly good it really doesn't matter. Real quick, let's just mention the power-ups. Yeah, Doom has power-ups, and they're pretty basic, nothing too groundbreaking. Besides the health and ammo, there are 7 distinct power-ups in Doom. The first power-up is the Berserk Pack, which sets the player's health to 100 and makes the fist do 10 times as much damage than normal. The next one is the Computer Map, which completes the map. Yeah, Doom has a map. It's not really useful unless you're looking for secrets. Then there's Invulnerability, which gives you God Mode for 30 seconds. The Light Amplifier gives you full bright vision. The Megasphere maxes out both health and armor to 200. Partial invisibility makes you, well, invisible. I don't know if there's an actual use for it. And the last power-up is the Radiation Shielding Suit, which protects you from poison floors. There's also a backpack that allows you to collect more ammo than your gun normally allows, a Soul Sphere that instantly gives you 200 health, and a Mega Armor that gives you 200 armor. And that's the power-ups. Before we end this section and move on to Doom 2, let's talk about Thigh Flesh Consumed. This fucking level pack is kinda terrible for the most part. Thigh Flesh Consumed feels like random bullshit half the time. In Mario Maker, there's often a phrase used to describe terrible levels, and that's Little Timmy levels. Thigh Flesh Consumed feels like a bunch of Little Timmy levels mashed into one, and that's partly due to Thigh Flesh Consumed not releasing with the other episodes, being released even after Doom 2. While it's not the worst Doom level pack, it's definitely not as high quality as the other 3. When I say the level design in Thigh Flesh Consumed is cruel, I mean it. The first level alone is probably the most difficult in Doom, excluding the other level packs like Sigil. I know a lot of people are probably gonna have problems with me saying that, but I kinda didn't like it, and that's okay, cause you're probably gonna hate me as we move on to Doom 2. Being first released not even a year after the original Doom, Doom 2 Hell on Earth is less of a sequel and more of an expansion. Doom 2 was created as a showcase of its software's advancements to the Doom engine, with bigger maps, new complex enemy types, and more interactive environments. I have a lot of mixed feelings about Doom 2. In my opinion, Doom 2 Hell on Earth is the worst version of Doom 1. Not only is the level design worse than in Doom 1, but the changes they added range from terrible to slightly decent. While Doom 2 is not a bad game, it's still Doom at the end of the day. It's not as good as Doom 1 was, and there's a few reasons why, so why don't we get into them. Back in the original Doom, there was a heavy emphasis on interesting level design. There were so many great levels in the original Doom. Like I mentioned in the Doom 1 section, the entirety of Knee Deep in the Dead is a perfect example of that, teaching the player the ropes and getting them ready for the next few chapters. The reason why those levels work so well is because they were small and compact. They weren't complex, and they weren't confusing. You were never told where to go, and that's fine because they weren't sprawling mazes. They were simple levels that you would run around, collect some key cards, and find the exit, while killing demons on your way there. Doom 2 takes that concept and throws it out the window. Almost every level in Doom 2 is giant. Now the reason why that's a problem is because Doom is built around encounters, you know, fighting. In Doom 2, once you clear out all the enemies in a map, there's times where you go long periods not fighting anything. It's very jarring compared to the original Doom. Not only that, but because Doom 2 doesn't have individual chapters like Doom 1, the game tends to feel like it's dragging along if you don't know how many levels there are. Now, I would be amiss if I didn't state that the levels themselves are fine for the most part. In fact, some of them are really good. In my opinion, there's a certain set of levels that are truly terrible, and you could probably guess which ones they are. Compared to Doom 1's maps, Doom 2's doesn't feel like it's using the environment to its fullest potential, unlike in Doom 1. While sure they look great, Doom 1 specifically, there are a lot of areas where you can use the environment around you to your advantage, either being able to use it as cover or to siphon enemies in order to kill them more easily. It just feels more thought out compared to Doom 2's maps. Speaking of less thought out on Doom 2's part, Doom 2 has a rather infamous level called Tricks and Traps. Do you remember how before we ended Doom 1's section, we were talking about how Thigh Flesh Consumed and how those levels felt like little Timmy levels mashed together? Well, Tricks and Traps takes that concept, takes a massive shit on it, blends it up, freezes it, and serves it on a popsicle stick. Boom, now you have Tricks and Traps, a mammoth shitstickle. Unlike Thigh Flesh Consumed, Tricks and Traps is bad because it's dumb. If you know exactly what to do to beat this level, you can beat it in less than 20 seconds, as the path is pretty easy to learn. All you have to do is grab the key card, grab this other key card, and then run to the exit. Oh, by the way, if you're wondering if that's a cyber demon, well yes, my good viewer, that is a cyber demon, as Doom 2 takes both bosses and makes them normal enemies. And this won't be the last time you see the cyber demon. And I kinda don't like that decision, because the cyber demon has been reduced to a simple enemy. It kinda takes away from the intimidation factor, but it doesn't matter, it's not that bad of a decision. Instead of serving as a boss, the cyber demon and Spider Mastermind now serve as difficulty checks, which I do like. Don't get me wrong, Doom 2 does have a bunch of creative ideas for maps, like the map Barrel Fun. For the majority of this map, you have to use the barrels in a variety of different ways, like outrunning them or using them to kill enemies. Then there's other maps like Monster Condo, The Living End, and Blood Falls. There are creative levels in Doom 2, it just sucks that they don't get to shine, because it always seemed to me Doom 2 was made to simply show off the advancements the engine had made. Now obviously I don't think Doom 2 was only created to show the advancements the engine had made, but what I do think is that was the primary reason. And one of the glaring examples of that stand out to me is the fact that barely any new content was added besides a few new enemies and only one new gun, and the only new gun they added really wasn't balanced. One thing I haven't seen a lot of people discuss about Doom Eternal is how the game forces you to manage your resources, as ammo and armor are sparse, which I have a feeling is due in part because of Doom 2. In Doom 2 there's a weapon called the SSG, or the Super Shotgun. This thing is downright broken, and the ammo for it is plentiful. Running out of ammo with the SSG is hard if you're not a dumbass. What makes the Super Shotgun so powerful is that it does almost 3 times the damage compared to the normal shotgun. It shreds even the toughest of enemies. Let's use the Caco Demon as an example. In the original Doom, Caco Demons were often used as blockades, a way to slow the player down due to not only having a massive amount of health, but also doing a massive amount of damage. It would take around 7 point-blank shots with this shotgun to take a Caco Demon down. Do you know how many shots it takes with the SSG? Well, let's count together. That's right, 2 point-blank shots. Pain Elementals, 2 shots. Hell Knights, 3. Arachnotrons, 3. Mancubus, 3. Archviles, 4. Even the Barons of Hell must succumb to the power of the Super Shotgun. What makes the SSG even funnier is the fact that you can find shotgun ammo all over the floor, from not only ammo pickups, but also the shotgunners as well. It makes Doom 2 a lot easier compared to Doom 1. The reason why it's such a big deal is because enemies like Caco Demons and Barons of Hell in the first game were meant to be obstacles that you had to slow down for, and slowing down in a game like Doom can spell your doom. Every enemy in this game is a complete joke because they all get humiliated by the Super Shotgun. But once again, all this criticism can be chalked up to me playing on Hurt Me Plenty, and honestly, it's just me nitpicking. Now, it's no secret to anyone that Doom 2 isn't as good as the original was. Now, that's not to say Doom 2 was a bad game or even unfun, it's still more Doom. However, it's just not as well constructed as Doom 1 was. Saying Doom 2 is just as good as the original is not something I can comfortably diverge to you, but what I can is the new selection of enemy types. Doom 2 introduces 8 new enemies, so let's tackle them one at a time, starting with Meet the Chain Gunners, the third hit scan enemy I was talking about in the Doom 1 section. The Chain Gunners are going to be one of the biggest obstacles you have to face in Doom 2. Not only do they do a lot of damage, but they're all over the place, taking the shotgunner's place as top priority. Because if you don't take them out immediately, they're going to take you out. The best way to take out the Chain Gunner is peeking them around corners, as it takes a second for them to actually start shooting. But once they do, you don't want to be in the line of sight. But just like the rest of the hit scanners, if you're being mindful of your surroundings, they shouldn't be too much of a problem. However, one of the biggest problems with the Chain Gunners is just like the other hit scanners, not only can they shoot you out of range, but still shred your health. This problem becomes more apparent in the city levels, especially map 15. There'll be many times where the Chain Gunner can wreck your shit, and you'll physically be unable to retaliate because they're outside of your shooting range. Even if they are in your range, they can still decimate you from like a mile away. But other than that, they're not that big of a deal. They go down just as easily as any other hit scanner. The next enemy we have are the Hell Knights. Now you may be wondering, what's the difference between the Hell Knights and the Barons of Hell? Well, actually very little, besides them having less health and a slightly different color palette. They act basically the same as Barons of Hell, so not much here. The inclusion of Hell Knights is strange to say the least. To my knowledge, they are no different compared to the Barons of Hell, which Doom 2 also includes the Barons of Hell. So why are they here? I really don't know. Moving on to the next enemy, we have the Revenant. These things are goofy as hell, but I love them. Revenants don't appear as much as other enemies in Doom 2, but there's still a fair amount of them. Revenants, like a bunch of other enemies in Doom, are projectile throwers. The Revenants have a fucking shoulder-mounted rocket launcher, and every once in a while will shoot out a homing rocket. But the best part about the Revenant is if you get too close to them, they will straight up punch you. This is so fucking dumb, I love it. Revenants aren't too much of a problem, like most other projectile throwers, but they can still give you trouble if you're not paying attention. Mancubus, or as I like to call them, baby cyber demons. These queso looking motherfuckers are going to be a big threat on your journey through hell. Something I really like about Doom 2's new enemies is how the new ones are a mixture between demon and machine, merging hell's forces with the machinery lying around the UAC facilities. The Mancubus is a great example of that, being both demon and machine, having flamethrowers embedded in its arms. As my nickname for them implies, they are basically miniaturized versions of cyber demons. The flames they shoot out act like rockets, except they lack splash damage. You don't come across too many of them, and that's probably a good thing as they shoot so incredibly fast. It can add a layer of challenge that some maps lack. The biggest example of this I can give is the level where you first meet the Mancubus, Map 7. Map 7 is a small arena where you have to face off against a few of them. Now, if it was any other enemy besides the Mancubus, secluding the previous boss enemies, this map would probably be the easiest. I know this because Map 18, the Courtyard, is a big open area with a bunch of enemies. However, in order to beat that level, you don't actually have to kill any enemies. In fact, there's a subsection of speedrunning in Doom 2 that's just speedrunning the Courtyard, but I digress. Map 07 also introduces our next enemy for the first time, the Arachnotrons. If it wasn't obvious enough, the Arachnotrons are just miniaturized versions of the Spider Mastermind from Doom 1, and they practically function the same way, except instead of having a chain gun, they have a plasma gun. The Arachnotrons aren't very noteworthy. They only appear a few times, and when they do, they don't really have that much health, nor do they do a lot of damage. The only time I can really remember the Arachnotrons being an actual threat is in map 27, Monster Condo, but that's quickly negated by there being an invulnerability power-up nearby. Out of all the enemies in Doom, the Arachnotron is the one I forget about the most. They don't really leave an impact, unlike the Pain Elementals. If you remember when I was talking about Doom 1, I mentioned the Lost Souls weren't very annoying. Doom 2 takes the Lost Souls and makes them 10 times more annoying because of the Pain Elementals. The Pain Elementals are Caco demons, except instead of fireballs, they shoot out Lost Souls. And whenever they die, they release more Lost Souls. These things are so hard to kill because every time you try to shoot it, it'll spawn a Lost Soul, which will take the damage for it. Like I mentioned, the Pain Elementals are Caco demons, except they shoot out Lost Souls, which means they're still pretty easy to kill with a few shotgun blasts. And the last enemy we have are the fucking Archviles. I hate the Archviles, you hate the Archviles, we all hate the Archviles. It's no secret that the Archviles are the worst enemy in Doom 2. Everyone hates the Archviles, and that's because they're so fucking annoying. Not only does it have a pretty damaging attack, but they also resurrect the dead enemies around you, which means they automatically take top priority, because you can kill an entire room of enemies just for them to be resurrected. But this rarely happens because you die before it can resurrect anything. Now, if you do know how to counter the Archviles attack, they do become slightly more easier. However, despite that, that, even with the knowledge on how to dodge their attacks, especially on higher difficulties, dodging their attacks can become difficult as you have to worry about the enemies around you, not just the Archviles. And the Archviles are always surrounded by other enemies. On top of that, the Archviles are also one of the strongest enemies in the game, taking 4 SSG shots in order to be put down, which means more often than not they'll be able to resurrect an enemy that you already killed before putting them down. Now, a downside to that is that sometimes they'll be too busy resurrecting other enemies in order to actually attack you, which means you do get a few free shots, making them not as much of a pain if they weren't distracted. But other than that, God, I hate the fucking Archviles. Now, some of you may have noticed I haven't discussed any of the new bosses in Doom 2, and that's because there are no new bosses. Kinda. The final boss of Doom 2, as most may know, is the Icon of Sin, but calling the Icon of Sin a boss battle is kinda like calling Super Mario Galaxy a good game. It's debatable. Just as debatable as calling the Icon of Sin a good level, because it's kinda not. All you have to do to beat the Icon of Sin is scale the top of the structure, get on the pillar down below, and shoot rockets into its head until it dies. Thankfully, he does return in Doom Eternal with a way better boss fight, but other than that, what's there really to say about the Icon of Sin, besides it being the big bad of the Doom series at that point? It truly is pretty disappointing, especially compared to the other bosses from Doom 1. I know I said the Spider Mastermind was also disappointing, but at least the Spider Mastermind was an actual fight. The map itself is also pretty uninteresting, just being a big open room with a few platforms that go up to this button which activates the pillar on the floor, and from what I've seen online, a lot of people share that sentiment. However, before the Icon of Sin, you do get one of the best maps in the game, Map 29, The Living End, but that still doesn't really help that the Icon of Sin is kind of a letdown. Speaking of maps and not good maps, let's finally talk about everyone's favorite group of levels, the city levels. I've seen a lot of people recently online defending Doom 2 city levels, and when I watch these videos I sit there and wonder, do they even know why Doom 2's city levels are even hated in the first place? And most of the time the defense boils down to, it was impressive for the time, which is not a good reason to vindicate arguably terrible levels. Now, I'm all for advancements in gaming, however, basing your enjoyment off of technical prowess is a bit scuffed. In fact, John Carmack wanted what was going to be Doom 4 that was later turned into Doom 2016 to be a leap in technical advancement above all else, including being a good game, because looking at the footage, yeah, this does look great, but it doesn't look like Doom. It looks like some shoddy Call of Duty ripoff. It's bad. Don't get me wrong, the city levels in Doom 2 are very impressive, but just because they're impressive doesn't mean they're good. In the intro, when I was talking about Doom 2's level design at points feeling like a giant maze, I was specifically talking about the city levels, but more specifically, I was talking about Map 13, Downtown, and Map 15, Industrial Zone. Calling Downtown a confusing maze would be too generous. While not all the city levels in Doom 2 are mazes, most of them just have flat out terrible level design. However, your reward for beating the city levels is getting to witness who would win in a fight, the Cyber Demon or the Spider Mastermind, and it's pretty obvious. For the most part, I don't think Doom 2's maps are terrible, however, the city levels are an exception to that. While not all of them are horrible, a good proportion of them are. Out of the 9 city levels, 5 of them are either bad, horribly designed, or downright abysmal. While I still hold the mentality that Doom 2 is a good game, somewhere around the halfway point where the city levels would be, that's where it kinda takes a dip in quality. The hell levels after the city ones do pick up the quality quite a bit, however, I still think the subterranean outpost levels were the best set of levels. But a few of the city levels were okay at best, just a little bland. I think both Doom 1 and 2 are phenomenal games, however, Doom 2 is slightly lesser quality than its predecessor. Doom 2 is still Doom except with the addition of an overpowered weapon. However, despite that fact, Doom 2 is still really good. Doom and its sequel are some of the most revolutionary games in gaming history, with some of the best gameplay I have ever experienced. While Doom and its sequels seem kinda primitive by today's standards, a lot of what Doom introduced is very important to gaming as a whole, but more specifically the FPS genre. There's a reason why Doom is often regarded one of the best FPS games, but not only that, one of the best games. While the new Doom titles might be made better by each patching title, the original and its sequel truly stand the test of time, and will probably continue to stand the test of time as more and more first-person shooters come out. The original Doom could never be outclassed, forgotten, or replaced, and I truly think the original Doom from 1993 is one of the best games ever made. Good night, ladies and gentlemen.